My daughter dropped my 2 grandchildren off with me, saying she'd be back in an hour. She never returned. 15 years later, she showed up with a lawyer, accusing me of kidnapping them. But when I handed the envelope to the judge, his face went pale, and he asked, "Do they know about this?" I replied, "Not yet." I still remember the sound of her heels clicking against the hardwood floor of my house. It was a Tuesday in October, around 3 in the afternoon. The sky was gray, threatening rain, and I had just finished folding sheets when I heard the doorbell. I opened the door, and there was Jessica, my daughter, with restless eyes and a worn-out suitcase in her hand. Beside her, Liam and Chloe looked up at me with that innocent confusion only children have. Liam was 4 years old. Chloe was barely 2. He was dragging a toy truck, missing its wheels. She was clutching a stuffed bunny with one ear torn off. "Mom, I need you to do me a huge favor," Jessica said, without even saying hello. Her voice was trembling. Her hair was pulled back in a rush, loose strands falling over her face. "It'll only be an hour, maybe 2. I have a job interview, and I can't take them with me." I looked at the children. Liam was yawning. Chloe was already reaching her little arms out to me. "An hour?" I asked, taking Chloe into my arms. She smelled of baby powder and that sweet scent babies have. "Yes, Mom, I promise. I'll be back before 6. Jessica dropped the suitcase on the floor, planted a quick kiss on her children's foreheads without looking them in the eye, and walked fast toward a car waiting with the engine running. I never saw who was driving. I closed the door. Liam tugged at my apron. "Grandma, I'm hungry." I made them grilled cheese sandwiches. I set them up with clean blankets on the living room sofa. 6 o'clock passed, then 7. At 8, I tried calling her. Her phone rang, but no one answered. At 9, Liam asked, "Is Mommy coming?" "She's coming, sweetheart," I lied, stroking his hair, but days passed. I tried calling again and again. By the 4th day, her number was disconnected. I went to her apartment in a rough part of Chicago. The landlord told me Jessica had left without paying 2 months' rent, leaving everything abandoned. There was no forwarding address, no note, no explanation, only silence, and 2 children who asked for their mother every night. The first few months were chaos. I was 68 years old, a widow for 3 years, living on my late husband Arthur's Social Security check and what I earned doing alterations on prom dresses. My house was modest, 2 bedrooms, a small living room, and a kitchen where the only luxury was the wall clock Arthur had given me for our 20th anniversary. It was an antique, hand-wound, with real gold accents. It was the only valuable thing we owned. But now I had 2 more mouths to feed, 2 little bodies that needed clothes, shoes, medicine. Liam started preschool. Chloe was still in diapers. I worked entire nights. The sewing machine became my companion in the early hours. I hemmed school uniforms, fixed trousers, embroidered napkins for the neighbors. My fingers bled sometimes, but it didn't matter. When Liam asked why I was crying while I sewed, I told him it was just tiredness. But it wasn't tiredness. It was the weight of a question tearing me apart inside. What did I do wrong as a mother for my daughter to abandon her own children? Years passed. Liam grew up fast, smart, curious. Chloe was quieter, but she had a tenderness that melted away any sadness. They called me Grandma Evelyn. I never spoke ill of Jessica. When they asked about her, I said, "Your mommy loves you. She just had to go far away." We celebrated birthdays with homemade apple pie. We decorated the Christmas tree with ornaments we made out of newspaper. When Liam wanted to join the high school football team, I sold my engagement ring to pay for the equipment and camp fees. No one asked me to. No one thanked me for it. But when I saw Liam running on that field with a huge smile, I knew it was worth it. Chloe got appendicitis when she was 8. The surgery and hospital stay, even with my limited coverage, left a bill of $15,000. I didn't have savings. I only had Arthur's clock. I sold it for $25,000 to a collector. I paid the hospital bill, bought her medication, and put the rest away for their education. That night, alone in my room, I caressed the empty space on the wall where the clock used to hang. I cried like I hadn't cried since Arthur's funeral. But the next day, when Chloe woke up after surgery and hugged me, whispering, "I love you, Grandma Evelyn," I understood something. True love isn't measured in objects. It is measured in invisible sacrifices. 15 years passed like that. Liam started college to study engineering. Chloe was in high school, dreaming of being a doctor. I kept sewing, now with thick glasses because my eyesight wasn't what it used to be. My house was still the same modest house, but it was full of laughter, arguments about homework, and music that Liam played on Sundays while we cooked together. I thought it would be like this forever. I thought we had finally found peace, until that Thursday in March, when the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there was Jessica. But she wasn't the scared woman from 15 years ago. This Jessica was wearing a pearl-colored pantsuit, designer sunglasses, and smelled of expensive perfume. Behind her, a man in a black suit carried a leather briefcase. "Hello, Mrs. Carter," Jessica said without even trying to smile. Mrs. Carter, not Mom. I felt the ground move beneath my feet. What was my daughter doing at my door after 15 years? And why did she bring a lawyer? If this story has touched your heart from the very first moment, I invite you to subscribe to the channel to continue joining me in these life stories that remind us that true family is built with actions, not words. I couldn't move. I stood there, clinging to the doorframe, looking at this woman who had once come from my womb, but now observed me as if I were a complete stranger. Jessica took off her sunglasses with a calculated, almost theatrical gesture. Her eyes were perfectly made up, but empty, cold as marble. "Aren't you going to invite us in?" she asked, gesturing to the man with the briefcase. "We need to talk. It's important." My throat was dry. I wanted to ask her 1,000 things. "Where have you been? Why did you never call? Do you know how many nights your children cried for you?" But the words got stuck somewhere between my chest and my mouth. I opened the door. They entered without waiting for confirmation. The man in the suit introduced himself with a professional, distant voice. "Mr. Harrison, litigation attorney." He extended a business card that I didn't take. He left it on the small living room table, next to the vase with plastic roses Chloe had given me years ago. Jessica swept the room with her gaze, as if she were appraising every crack in the walls, every piece of old furniture, every detail of our dignified poverty. She stopped in front of the photo of Liam and Chloe at their last graduation. She picked it up, observing it without expression. "They've grown so much," she murmured, but there was no emotion in her words. It was like hearing someone comment on the weather. "Yes," was the only thing I could say. My hands were trembling. I hid them in my apron. Jessica put the photo back and sat on the sofa without waiting to be invited. The lawyer remained standing, briefcase under his arm, like a soldier awaiting orders. "I suppose you're wondering why I'm here after so long," Jessica said, crossing her legs. Her nails were perfectly manicured, painted a deep wine color. I thought of my own hands, full of calluses and needle scars. "I've wondered that every day for 15 years, I replied, my voice coming out steadier than I expected. "But I suppose now I'll finally get an answer." Jessica smiled, but it was a smile without warmth. "Always so dramatic, Mom. Look, I know I made mistakes in the past. I was young. I was scared. I didn't know how to be a mother." She paused, as if expecting me to interrupt with comforting words. "I didn't," she continued. "But I've matured. I've built a life, and now I want to reclaim what belongs to me." "What belongs to you?" I repeated, not understanding. Mr. Harrison stepped forward and opened his briefcase. He pulled out a manila folder with documents. "Mrs. Evelyn Carter," he said in an official tone. "My client, Mrs. Jessica Miller Stewart, is here to claim legal custody of her children, Liam Alexander and Chloe Elizabeth Miller. Furthermore, she is filing a formal lawsuit for unlawful retention of minors and compensation for emotional distress." The words fell on me like stones. Unlawful retention, emotional distress, compensation. "What are you talking about?" I asked, looking at Jessica. "You abandoned them. You left and never came back." "That's your version," Jessica replied, leaning forward. "My version is different. I came to ask you for temporary help. You manipulated me, made me feel like a bad mother, and drove me away from my own children. For 15 years I tried to get them back, but you always put up obstacles." The room spun. I felt the air becoming thick, impossible to breathe. "That's a lie," I whispered. "Oh, really?" Jessica pulled out her phone and swiped the screen. I have evidence that I tried to contact you. Messages you never answered, calls you blocked. Your phone was disconnected. I went looking for you. And you had moved without leaving an address. The lawyer raised a hand, interrupting. Mrs. Carter, these accusations will be evaluated in the appropriate court. For now, I must inform you that my client is requesting immediate custody of the minors, or, failing that, financial compensation for the lost years. Compensation? I looked at Jessica. You came for money? I came for my children, she replied. But her eyes said otherwise. But I also deserve to be compensated for the pain you caused me, for the years you stole from me. My lawyers calculate it's approximately $250,000 in emotional damages. I laughed. It was a bitter laugh, devoid of joy. $250,000? I don't even have $20,000. Look around you, Jessica. Do you see wealth here? I live on a widow's pension that barely covers food. That's not my problem, Jessica said, standing up. You decided to keep them. Now accept the consequences. At that moment, I heard the front door open. Young voices filled the hallway. Liam and Chloe were home from school. Grandma Evelyn, we brought donuts for dinner. Chloe's voice cut off abruptly when she entered the living room and saw Jessica. Liam appeared behind her. His face changed completely when he saw the woman sitting on our sofa. Mom, Liam said, and the word sounded strange in his mouth, as if he were pronouncing the name of someone he only knew from old photographs. Jessica stood up, smoothing her suit. She tried to smile, but it was an uncomfortable grimace. Hello, my loves. Look how much you've grown. You're beautiful. Chloe clung to my arm. Liam took a protective step forward. What are you doing here? Liam asked. His voice was hard, controlled. After 15 years? I came for you, Jessica replied, extending her arms as if expecting a hug. No one moved. I came to get my family back. Family? Chloe spoke for the first time, tears in her eyes. We aren't your family. We don't even know you. Jessica lowered her arms slowly. Her expression hardened. I am your biological mother. You can't change that, and I have come to claim what is rightfully mine. Mr. Harrison pulled out more documents. Mr. Liam and Miss Chloe Miller, I must inform you that there is a legal process initiated by your biological mother to regain custody and— Custody? Liam interrupted him. I'm 19. She's 17. We aren't little kids anymore. The process includes a lawsuit for emotional damages against Mrs. Evelyn Carter, the lawyer continued, unperturbed. It alleges unlawful retention, psychological manipulation, and— Enough! I shouted, my voice resonating off the walls of this house that had seen so much love. If you want to sue me, Jessica, go ahead, but this will be settled in front of a judge. Not here, not in my house, not in front of them. Jessica looked at me with something that might have been surprise. Maybe she expected me to crumble, to beg, to humiliate myself. But 15 years of raising her children had taught me something. True love is also brave. Perfect, Jessica said, grabbing her purse. See you in court then. I hope you have a good lawyer. You're going to need one. She headed for the door, but before leaving, she turned to Liam and Chloe. Kids, I know this is confusing, but soon you'll understand that everything I do is for your own good. Your grandmother has filled your heads with lies about me, but the truth always comes out. She closed the door behind her. The silence left behind was deafening. Chloe hugged me, sobbing. Liam punched the wall with a closed fist, leaving a dent. Grandma Evelyn, Chloe whispered against my shoulder. Is it true? Did you keep her away from us? I stroked her hair, the same hair I had combed for 15 years, braided for school, dried after every bath. No, sweetie, I replied, and I'm going to prove it. That night, after Liam and Chloe went to sleep, restless and full of questions, I went to my room. From the back of my closet, behind boxes of photos and old clothes, I pulled out a shoebox. Inside was everything. The notarized letter Jessica wrote 15 years ago, the police reports for a missing person, the phone records, the bills for medical expenses, school, food, receipts, photographs, evidence of every dollar I spent, of every tear I dried, of every sleepless night. I had kept it all. Not for revenge. I kept it for love. Because I knew that someday my grandkids might ask. And I wanted to have real answers, not made-up ones. I opened Jessica's letter and read her handwritten words. I can't be a mother. I'm going to Miami with Richard. Don't look for us. It's better this way. I folded the paper carefully and put it back in the envelope. Jessica wanted war, but she didn't know that for 15 years I had archived every silent battle we fought. And now, in front of a judge, the truth was going to speak louder than her perfectly applied makeup. The days that followed were a waking nightmare. Liam and Chloe walked through the house like shadows, dragging questions they didn't dare ask out loud. I saw them looking at me sideways while I cooked, as if they suddenly doubted every word I had told them for 15 years. That doubt in their eyes hurt me more than any insult Jessica could throw at me. A week later, the official summons arrived. A manila envelope. Family Court District 3. Hearing scheduled for April 27th. Lawsuit for unlawful retention of minors and emotional damages. Signed by Attorney Harrison, representing Jessica Miller Stewart. Miller Stewart. She had even hyphenated her name. You need a lawyer, Grandma? Liam said that night at dinner. He had barely touched his food. This is serious. She has resources. She has an expensive lawyer. I have the truth, I replied, trying to sound more sure than I felt. That has to be worth something. Chloe put her fork down on the plate with a dry clatter. What if it isn't? What if the judge believes her? Her voice broke. What if she says that you... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen, a cup of cold coffee in my hands, looking at the walls of this house that had witnessed so much. In the corner were the pencil marks where I measured Liam every year on his birthday. On the fridge, Chloe's drawings I never had the heart to take down. On the shelf, photos of graduations, Christmases, ordinary Sundays that were extraordinary because we lived them together. How do you defend love when someone calls it kidnapping? I borrowed $2,000 from my friend Stella, who sold her car to help me. With that money, I hired Sarah Jenkins, a young lawyer who worked in a small office near the grocery store. She didn't have the fancy suit of Jessica's lawyer, but she had something he didn't. An honest gaze. This is serious, Mrs. Carter, she told me after reviewing the documents. But we have strong elements, especially if you have proof of the initial abandonment. I showed her the shoebox, the letter, the reports, the receipts. Sarah read everything in silence. When she finished, she had tears in her eyes. You don't just have a case, she said. You have a story that any judge with a heart won't be able to ignore. But I knew judges don't always have hearts. Sometimes, they only have laws, papers, and deadlines. The day of the hearing arrived like winter, inevitable and cold. I wore my best dress, the navy blue one I used for church. Liam and Chloe insisted on coming with me. We arrived at the courthouse an hour early. The hallways smelled of stale coffee and dusty files. Jessica appeared exactly on time, as if she had timed her entrance for maximum impact. She wore an ivory suit with gold details. Her hair was in an impeccable bun. Beside her, Mr. Harrison carried a tower of folders. Behind them, a tall man with sunglasses and a gold watch observed everything with a bored expression. She didn't introduce him, but I knew who he was. Richard, the man she abandoned her children for. Jessica looked me up and down, assessing my worn dress, my old shoes, my purse with the broken zipper. She smiled. It was a smile of anticipated victory. Good morning, Mom, she said, and the word Mom sounded like an insult in her mouth. I didn't answer. I squeezed Chloe's hand, which was trembling in mine. The courtroom was small, with beige walls and that particular smell of legal documents that had always intimidated me. Judge Miller entered on time. He was a man in his 60s, with completely white hair and a serious expression. He sat behind his dark wooden bench and opened the file without looking at any of us. Initial hearing for case 472A, he said in a monotone voice. Custody and emotional damages, suit filed by Mrs. Jessica Miller Stewart against Mrs. Evelyn Carter. Are the parties present? Present, Your Honor, replied Mr. Harrison, standing up with rehearsed movements. Present? Said my lawyer Sarah, with a firm voice even though it was her first time in front of this judge. Judge Miller looked at us over his reading glasses. Before proceeding, I want to clarify something. I understand the minors in question are essentially adults. Mr. Liam Miller is 19 and Miss Chloe Miller is 17. Is that correct? Correct, Your Honor, Harrison confirmed. However, the custody process was initiated when they were legally minors, and the lawsuit for emotional damages remains valid regardless of current ages. The judge nodded and looked toward where we were seated. Are the young people present? Liam and Chloe stood up. Yes, Your Honor, Liam answered. I want you to know that, although the process continues, you have a voice in this room. If you wish to testify or express your position, you have the right to do so. Understood? Understood, they said in unison. The judge turned his attention back to Jessica. Mrs. Miller Stewart, this court has reviewed your claim. You allege that your mother, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, illegally retained your children for a period of 15 years, preventing you from contacting them and causing severe emotional harm. Is that correct? Jessica stood up with elegant movements, as if she were on a runway. That is correct, Your Honor. For 15 years, I tried to get my children back. My mother manipulated the situation, making me look like an irresponsible mother, when the reality is that I was a victim of her manipulations. Her voice was soft, victimized, perfectly modulated. If I didn't know the truth, I might have even believed her. My client, interrupted Mr. Harrison, was a young, scared mother who went to her own mother for temporary support. Instead of helping her, Mrs. Carter took advantage of my client's vulnerability to appropriate her children. During these 15 years, my client attempted on multiple occasions to establish contact, but was systematically blocked. Do you have proof of these contact attempts? The judge asked. Harrison pulled documents from his folder. We have phone records, text messages, and testimonies from individuals who can confirm that my client never voluntarily abandoned her children. The judge took the papers and reviewed them with a neutral expression. My heart was beating so hard, I thought everyone in the room could hear it. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, the judge said finally, looking at me. How do you respond to these accusations? I stood up. My legs were shaking, but my voice wasn't. Your Honor, I didn't retain anyone. I saved 2 children who were abandoned, and I have proof of every word I say. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proof? Sarah stood up quickly. Your Honor, the defense requests permission to present documentation that completely contradicts the plaintiff's version. Proceed, ordered the judge. Sarah looked at me. I took the manila envelope out of my bag, that worn envelope I had kept for 15 years at the bottom of my closet. I held it in my hands for a moment, feeling the weight of everything it contained. I walked toward the judge's bench. Every step resonated in the tense silence of the room. I could feel Jessica's eyes burning into my back. I could hear her breathing speed up. I placed the envelope in front of Judge Miller. Here is the truth, Your Honor, I said simply. The judge opened the envelope with slow, methodical movements. He pulled out the first document, Jessica's handwritten letter. He read it in silence. I saw his expression shift subtly, his brows furrowing. He pulled out the second document, the police report I filed when Jessica disappeared. Then the photographs, the receipts, the medical records, the school certificates, everything. The silence in the room was absolute. Only the rustle of paper was heard as the judge reviewed each document. When he finished, he looked up. His face had lost all neutrality. There was something in his eyes that wasn't just professional. It was human. He looked at Jessica, then at me, then at Liam and Chloe. Mrs. Miller Stewart, he said slowly, holding the handwritten letter. Do you recognize this letter? Jessica paled visibly. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The judge read aloud. I can't be a mother. I'm going to Miami with Richard. Don't look for us. It's better this way. He looked at her. Jessica? The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Is this your handwriting? The judge insisted. I was confused, Jessica stammered. I was young. I was scared. Did you sign this letter voluntarily in front of a notary? Yes, but yes or no? Yes. The judge put the letter down on the bench and picked up the other documents. I see here that Mrs. Evelyn Carter filed a missing persons report 3 days after the abandonment. I see documented attempts at contact. I see that you changed your phone number, your address, and left no contact information. He looked directly at Jessica. Are you aware of the gravity of presenting false accusations before this court? Attorney Harrison stood up quickly. Your Honor, my client acted under extreme emotional stress. Your client, the judge interrupted with a sharp voice, filed a lawsuit accusing her own mother of kidnapping when the evidence clearly shows she abandoned her children. He paused, looking at the documents again. And not only that, I see here medical expenses, school costs, food, totaling over $1 million in 15 years. He looked at Jessica with an expression that no longer hid his disapproval. Did you send any kind of financial support during these 15 years? Silence. Any calls? Any letters? Any sign that you remembered you had 2 children? More silence. The judge turned to Liam and Chloe. His expression softened slightly. Young folks, I have a question for you, and I need you to be completely honest. Liam and Chloe nodded. At any time in these 15 years, did your grandmother prevent you from seeing your mother? Did she forbid you from talking about her? Did she tell you that you couldn't look for her? Liam spoke first, with a steady voice. No, Your Honor. Grandma Evelyn never spoke ill of her. She always told us our mother loved us, that someday she would return. It was she who never came back, Chloe added, tears running down her cheeks. Grandma sold the only valuable things she had to take care of us. My grandfather's watch, her wedding ring, everything. While that woman, she pointed at Jessica, lived in big houses and wore expensive clothes. Judge Miller took a deep breath. He looked at the envelope, then at Jessica, then back at me. And then he asked the phrase that would change everything. Mrs. Carter, do your grandchildren know everything contained in these documents? Do they know exactly what their mother wrote in this letter? Do they know all the details? I looked at Liam and Chloe. These children I had raised, who had become good, strong adults despite everything. Not yet, Your Honor, I replied with a broken voice. I spared them that pain because I thought it would never be necessary, because I wanted to protect them from a truth that would have destroyed them. The judge nodded slowly, and I saw something in his eyes that gave me hope. Recognition, not of laws or procedures, but of something deeper, of the silent sacrifice of a grandmother who chose to carry the weight of the truth alone so her grandchildren could sleep in peace. Judge Miller closed the folder with a sharp movement that echoed through the room. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, as if processing something that went beyond the legal, something that touched the human soul. When he put them back on, his gaze was no longer neutral. It was hard as granite. We are going to take a 30-minute recess, he announced. When we return, I want to hear full testimonies. And Mrs. Miller-Stewart, he paused significantly, I suggest you carefully consider what you are going to say. False accusations in this court have consequences. He stood up and exited through the back door. As soon as he disappeared, Jessica turned to Mr. Harrison with furious eyes. Why didn't you tell me we needed to counter this? She hissed between her teeth, loud enough for me to hear. You told me there was no letter, Harrison replied with a tense voice. You told me everything had been verbal. It was 15 years ago. I didn't remember. You didn't remember signing a notarized relinquishment of maternity? Well, the lawyer closed his briefcase with a snap. Ma'am, I have to revise my strategy. This completely changes the case. They went out into the hallway. Richard, the man with the dark glasses, followed them without a word. I could see them through the glass of the door, arguing in low voices. Jessica gestured dramatically. Harrison shook his head. Grandma Evelyn! Chloe grabbed my hand. Her fingers were ice cold. What else is in that letter? What haven't you told us? I looked into her eyes, so similar to mine, full of that mix of fear and need for truth people have when they feel the ground moving beneath them. Later, sweetie, I whispered. When we get out of here, I'll tell you everything. I promise. Liam approached the window, looking out at the parking lot. That guy with her. Is that Richard? I think so, I replied. The man she abandoned us for. It wasn't a question. It was a bitter statement. He looks like a used car salesman with gambling debts. Sarah, my lawyer, approached with a bottle of water. Mrs. Carter, you're doing very well. The judge is on our side. I can see it. But get ready. When we go back, Jessica is going to try to justify herself. She's going to make every excuse possible. Don't let her provoke you. I won't, I replied, taking a sip of water. But my throat remained dry as a desert. The 30 minutes passed like 30 seconds. When the judge returned, we all went back to our places. Jessica had red eyes. She had been crying, or at least pretending to cry. Her makeup was slightly smudged, as if she had ruined it on purpose to look vulnerable. Judge Miller sat down and opened the folder again. This time, he took out the letter and placed it in front of him, visible to everyone. Mrs. Miller Stewart, he began, I'm going to give you the opportunity to explain this letter, and I warn you that everything you say will be recorded in the transcript of this hearing. Jessica stood up. She discreetly wiped away a non-existent tear. Your Honor, she said with a trembling voice, I was a child when I wrote that. I was barely 25. 25 isn't a child? The judge interrupted. It's a young adult with responsibilities. You're right, Your Honor. But I was in an abusive relationship. My children's father had abandoned me. I didn't have a job. I didn't have money. My mother, she pointed at me with an accusing gesture, made me feel like a failure, that I was never going to be able to take care of them. Did she tell you that? Asked the judge, looking at me. I stood up. Never, Your Honor. I told her I would help her, that we could do it together, that she didn't have to be alone. Liar! Jessica shouted, momentarily losing her calculated composure. You always judged me. You always made me feel inferior. When Richard appeared, when finally someone made me feel valuable, you didn't accept it. That's why I left, because I needed to save myself. The silence in the room was so dense, I could feel it pressing against my chest. I see, said the judge slowly. So your argument is that you fled a situation of emotional pressure. Exactly, Your Honor. And why didn't you return in 15 years? Why didn't you call? Write, send money? Jessica hesitated. Richard and I were building our life. We had money problems at first. And then, when we finally stabilized, so much time had passed that I was afraid. Afraid of what? That my children would hate me. That my mother had filled their heads with lies about me. But you weren't afraid to sue her for $250,000. The room went silent. Jessica opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The judge continued, his voice cutting like a scalpel. According to your lawsuit, you seek compensation for lost years and emotional damage. However, the years were lost by your own decision, and the emotional damage was caused by you abandoning your children voluntarily. Your Honor, Mr. Harrison intervened, clearly uncomfortable. My client acted under difficult circumstances. Circumstances that were resolved years ago, apparently, the judge interrupted. Because I see here, he pulled another document from the folder, one Sarah had presented, that Mrs. Miller Stewart currently lives in a residence valued at $1.5 million in an exclusive area of Miami. She drives a luxury vehicle, has active bank accounts, and yet, in 15 years, she never sent a single dollar for the support of her children. Liam stood up suddenly from his seat. $1.5 million? His voice was a contained roar. You lived in a $1 million house while Grandma Evelyn sold Grandpa's watch to pay for my appendix surgery? Liam, sit down, ordered the judge, but his tone wasn't severe. It was understanding. No, Your Honor. Liam turned to Jessica. All my life I wondered what I had done wrong so my mother wouldn't come back. I thought maybe it was my fault, that I cried too much as a baby, that I was a bad son. His voice broke. And it turns out we were just, what? An inconvenience? An obstacle to your life of luxury with Richard? Chloe also stood up, tears running freely. Grandma Evelyn worked until 3 a.m, sewing so I could have new shoes for school. Do you know what it's like to wake up in the night and hear the sewing machine? Knowing your 60-something grandmother is destroying her back because your mother walked out? I didn't abandon you because of you, Jessica shouted, also standing up. You don't understand what it's like to be a mother so young. You don't understand the pressure, the fear. You were 25, Chloe yelled back. Grandma Evelyn had me at 23 and never abandoned me. The difference isn't age, it's character. Order! The judge banged his gavel against the bench. Everyone sit down. Now. We sat down slowly. The tension was so thick it was hard to breathe. Judge Miller took a deep breath. Mrs. Miller Stewart, I am going to ask you a very direct question, and I want a direct answer. Why are you here now? Why, after 15 years, do you suddenly decide you want your children back? Jessica hesitated. She looked at Mr. Harrison, who avoided her gaze. She looked at Richard, who watched everything with an inscrutable expression behind his dark glasses. Why? Because they are my children, she answered finally. Because I regret leaving. Because I want to be part of their lives. And the $250,000 you are demanding? It's fair compensation for. For what? The judge leaned forward. Compensation for what exactly? For having lived 15 years without the burden of raising 2 children? For having been able to build your real estate empire without the nuisance of paying for diapers? Your Honor, that isn't fair, Harrison began. Do you know what isn't fair, counselor? The judge held up a receipt from the pile of documents. That a 68-year-old widow with a minimal pension had to work until dawn to pay for the education of children who were not her legal responsibility. That isn't fair. That she had to sell her only sentimental possessions to pay for medical emergencies. That isn't fair. That after 15 years of silent sacrifice, her own daughter comes to accuse her of kidnapping. That, counselor, is profoundly unfair. The judge took Jessica's handwritten letter and held it high. This letter is not only a relinquishment of maternity, it is evidence of deliberate and premeditated abandonment. And frankly, Mrs. Miller-Stewart, the more I listen to you, the more I wonder if this isn't simply an extortion attempt disguised as family reunification. That's not true. Jessica stood up again, her face flushed. I love my children. You love them? The judge looked at her with a coldness that dropped the temperature of the room. Do you know what Liam's favorite food is? Do you know what major Chloe is studying? Do you know Liam has a scar on his left knee from falling off his bike when he was 7? Do you know Chloe is allergic to shrimp? Do you know anything, absolutely anything, about the lives of the people you claim to love? Jessica opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out, and in that deafening silence, we all understood the truth. She knew nothing. She hadn't asked anything. She didn't care about anything. She just wanted something, and that something wasn't love. The judge closed the folder with a definitive sound that sounded like the closing of a chapter. But I knew the real pain was yet to come, because the truth, when it finally comes to light after 15 years of darkness, doesn't illuminate gently. It burns. Judge Miller let a full minute pass in silence, a minute that felt like an eternity. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, the creaking of chairs, Jessica's agitated breathing. Finally, the judge spoke. We are going to proceed with testimonies, he announced. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, please approach the stand. I got up on shaky legs. Sarah gave my shoulder a squeeze before I walked to the front. The stand was just a raised chair next to the judge's desk, but it felt like standing on the edge of a precipice. Mrs. Carter, the judge began, his tone softer now. Tell this court, in your own words, what happened the day your daughter left your grandchildren with you. I took a deep breath. The images of that Tuesday in October came back with painful clarity. It was around 3 in the afternoon. I began, and my voice sounded distant, as if coming from someone else. I was folding laundry when the doorbell rang. I opened it and found Jessica with Liam and Chloe. They were confused, tired. Jessica was in a hurry. She was nervous. She told me she had a job interview, that she only needed an hour or 2. I paused, feeling the lump in my throat. I made the children grilled cheese. I put blankets on the sofa for them. I waited. The hours passed. I called her phone again and again. By the 4th day, her number was disconnected. What did you do then? The judge asked. I went to her apartment. The landlord told me she had left without paying rent, that she had abandoned everything. I went to the police and filed a missing person report. I searched hospitals, shelters. I called every person I knew who might know something. My voice broke. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole. Only the earth didn't swallow her. She chose to disappear. At any point during those first days or weeks, did she tell you she couldn't take her children? Did she threaten you? Did she manipulate you in any way? No, Your Honor. I wanted her to come back. I wanted her children to have their mother. And when did you decide to keep them permanently? I closed my eyes, remembering. It was about 3 months in. Liam cried every night asking for his mom. Chloe had stopped speaking almost entirely. One day, Liam asked me if I was going to leave too. He looked at me with those eyes full of fear and said, "Don't go, Grandma. Please don't go." A tear rolled down my cheek. That's when I decided someone had to stay. Someone had to be constant in their lives. If their mother wasn't going to be that person, then I would be. The judge nodded slowly. Was it easy? I laughed, but it was a joyless laugh. No, Your Honor, it wasn't easy. I was 68. I lived on my late husband's pension, which was barely $1,200 a month. Suddenly, I had to pay for diapers, milk, clothes, medicine, school. I had to start sewing until late at night. I made uniforms, hemmed pants, embroidered tablecloths. My fingers bled from working so much. Why didn't you seek government help? Didn't you consider putting them up for adoption? The question hit me like a slap. Adoption? I repeated, incredulous. Your Honor, they were my grandchildren. They weren't furniture I could donate when they became uncomfortable. They were two little children who had already been abandoned by their mother. Was I going to abandon them too? Was I going to teach them that in this world no one stays, that everyone eventually leaves you? The judge nodded with approval in his eyes. Tell me about the sacrifices you made. Everything, I said simply. I sacrificed everything. I sold my engagement ring to pay for Liam's football registration because the other kids were inviting him and I knew he needed to feel included. I sold my late husband's watch, a watch he inherited from his father, to pay for Chloe's surgery when she had appendicitis. It was the only valuable thing I had left, the only thing I had of Arthur's. My voice broke completely. But Chloe needed that surgery. And a watch, no matter how much it hurts, is just an object. My granddaughter is life. I saw the judge writing notes. Jessica was looking down, not daring to meet my gaze. And during all this time, did you receive any kind of support from your daughter? Nothing, Your Honor. Not a dollar, not a call, not a letter, nothing. Did you speak ill of their mother to the children? Never. I told them their mother loved them, that someday they would understand that sometimes adults make mistakes, but that doesn't mean they don't love us. I lied to them to protect the image of a woman who didn't deserve it, because I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought someday she would return remorseful, and my grandchildren would have the chance to know their mother. The judge looked at me for a long moment. You may return to your seat, Mrs. Carter. Thank you for your testimony. I went back to my chair. Chloe took my hand immediately. Liam had his fists clenched on his knees. Mrs. Jessica Miller Stewart, called the judge. Your turn. Jessica approached the stand with slower movements now, less sure. She sat in the chair and folded her hands in her lap. Mrs. Miller Stewart, the judge began, and his tone was noticeably colder than he had used with me. What can you say in your defense? I was young, Jessica began. I didn't know how to be a mother. My children's father had abandoned us. I didn't have money. My mother, with respect, Your Honor, but she was always very hard on me. She always expected perfection. When I met Richard, he offered me a way out, a chance to start over. And your children weren't part of that new beginning? Jessica wrung her hands. Richard wasn't ready to be a father. He said we had to get established first, create a solid base. He promised me that later we could bring the kids with us. And when was that later? Asked the judge with evident skepticism. In what year, specifically, did you and Richard decide you were established and ready to recover your children? Silence. Mrs. Miller Stewart, I asked you a question. There wasn't. There wasn't a specific moment, Jessica admitted, with a barely audible voice. Things were always complicated. Richard was building his business, then we had to move. Then there were legal problems with the company. Legal problems? The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Harrison stood up quickly. Your Honor, those matters are completely separate from this case. Oh, really? The judge pulled out another document. Because I see here a report from the IRS indicating that Mr. Richard Stewart is currently under investigation for tax evasion and money laundering. Is that correct? The color drained from Jessica's face. Your Honor, intervened Sarah, standing up. The defense has conducted its own investigation into the real motives of this lawsuit. With your permission, I would like to present additional evidence. Proceed. Sarah took a folder from her briefcase. Your Honor, we have discovered that the real reason for this sudden family reunification has little to do with maternal love and a lot to do with urgent financial needs. She handed documents to the judge. My heart was pounding. Sarah hadn't told me anything about this. The judge read in silence. His eyebrows rose higher and higher. When he finished, he looked at Jessica with something that could be described as disgust. According to these documents, the judge said slowly, "Mr. Stewart needs to legitimize a certain amount of money, and the most effective way to do so is through legal dependents who can appear as beneficiaries of various transactions." He paused. "Is this the real reason for your lawsuit, Mrs. Miller Stewart? Do you need to regain legal custody of your children to use them as a front in a money laundering scheme?" The room exploded in murmurs. The judge banged his gavel, demanding order. "That's not true!" Jessica shouted, standing up. "I came for my children because they are my children." "Then explain to me," said the judge with a cutting voice, "why your lawsuit includes a clause requesting that Liam and Chloe be registered retroactively as your tax dependents for the last 5 years, when you never contributed to their support?" Jessica opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "Explain to me why your lawyer prepared documents to transfer inheritances and donations to your children for amounts exceeding $150,000? "Your Honor," began Mr. Harrison, visibly nervous. "Explain to me," continued the judge, ignoring the lawyer, "why a woman who has allegedly been suffering from the loss of her children for 15 years suddenly decides to act precisely when her husband faces criminal charges that require urgent financial moves?" The silence was absolute. I could hear my own breathing. Liam rose slowly from his seat. His voice was low, but every word cut like glass. "You didn't come for us. You came for dirty money." "Liam, no!" Jessica reached a hand toward him. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Liam replied. "For 15 years we weren't important enough. But now that your criminal husband needs to wash money, suddenly you remembered you have kids." Chloe also stood up, with tears of rage in her eyes. "Do you know what's the saddest part? That part of me always had hope. I always thought maybe someday you would knock on the door and say, 'I'm sorry.' That you would explain you had been sick, or lost, or kidnapped. Anything that explained why you left us." Her voice broke. "But it's worse than that. Much worse. You weren't sick. You weren't lost. You just didn't want us enough." Jessica collapsed into the chair, sobbing. But I had seen enough fake tears in my life to recognize them. These weren't from repentance. They were from frustration because her plan had been exposed. The judge closed the folder with a final movement. "I have heard enough," he announced. "This hearing will continue in 3 days to pass sentence. But I must warn all parties that what I have witnessed here today is not just a failed custody case. It is potential evidence of attempted fraud, manipulation of the legal system, and misuse of minors for illegal purposes." He looked directly at Jessica. "Mrs. Miller Stewart, I strongly suggest you consult not only with your family lawyer, but also with a criminal defense attorney, because depending on how the fiscal investigation against your husband proceeds, you could face charges as an accomplice." Jessica paled completely. "This hearing is adjourned until Friday at 10 in the morning." Jessica ran out of the room, followed by Mr. Harrison, who was speaking frantically on the phone. Richard disappeared without a word, like rats abandoning a sinking ship. We stood there, Liam, Chloe, Sarah, and I, in the middle of the silence left after the storm. Sarah hugged me. "You did incredible, Mrs. Carter. The judge is completely on your side." But I didn't feel victory. I only felt a deep exhaustion that reached my bones. Liam took my hand. "Grandma Evelyn, why didn't you tell us all this before?" I looked him in the eyes, those eyes I had watched grow from child to man. "Because you didn't deserve to carry that weight. You had already lost your mother. You didn't need to also lose the illusion that maybe somewhere she thought of you." Chloe hugged me tightly. "We love you, Grandma Evelyn. You are the only mother we need." And there, in that cold courtroom that had witnessed so much pain, I finally allowed the tears I had held back for 15 years to fall. Because sometimes the truth doesn't set you free gently. It shatters you first, and only later, very slowly, does it begin to heal you. The 3 days until the next hearing were the longest of my life. Longer than the nights sewing until dawn. Longer than those first months waiting for Jessica to return. Because now there was no uncertainty, There was clarity, and clarity, I discovered, can be more painful than doubt. Liam and Chloe didn't talk much. I saw them moving through the house like sleepwalkers, processing everything they had heard in court. Chloe stopped touching her food. Liam spent hours looking out the window without really seeing anything. The night before the final hearing, the three of us sat at the kitchen table. I had made chicken noodle soup, the dish I always made when they were sick or sad. But no one was eating. "Grandma Evelyn," Chloe said finally, breaking the silence. "Can we read the full letter?" The one she wrote. My heart contracted. "Sweetie, I don't think. We need to know everything," Liam interrupted. His voice was firm, but his eyes were wet. "We aren't kids anymore. We deserve to know the whole truth." I went to my room and got the shoebox. I returned with the manila envelope and placed it on the table between us. My hands trembled as I took out the letter. "It doesn't have to be now," I said quietly. "You can wait." "Read it, please," asked Chloe. I unfolded the paper carefully. Jessica's handwriting was hurried, careless. I read aloud. "To whom it may concern, I, Jessica Miller, voluntarily declare that I cannot continue being the mother of Liam Alexander and Chloe Elizabeth. I do not have the resources, the maturity, or the desire to raise children at this moment in my life. I leave them in the care of my mother, Evelyn Carter, who has full freedom to make all decisions regarding their upbringing, education, and welfare. I am going with Richard Stewart to Miami to start a new life. Don't look for them. Don't look for me. It is better this way for everyone. They deserve someone who can give them what I cannot give." Signed, Jessica Miller, October 23rd. The silence that followed was so dense, it hurt. Chloe let out a sob. Liam closed his eyes tight, clenching his fists on the table. "I do not have the desire," Chloe repeated with a broken voice. "I do not have the desire to raise children." She didn't even say my children, just children. "As if we were strangers," added Liam bitterly. "As if we were a couple of pieces of furniture she left in a house she didn't like anymore." I hugged them both while they cried. And I cried with them, because some truths are too heavy to carry alone. That night, none of us slept well. Friday arrived cloudy, threatening rain. We dressed in silence and arrived at the courthouse half an hour early. Sarah was already there, reviewing documents with a concentrated expression. "Good morning," she greeted us. "Are you ready?" "Is anyone ready for this?" replied Liam with a sad smile. Jessica arrived exactly on time. This time she came alone, without Richard, without Attorney Harrison. In his place, she brought an older woman, thin, with thick glasses and a worn briefcase. "New lawyer," murmured Sarah. "Harrison abandoned the case. Too much risk to his reputation." We entered the courtroom. Judge Miller appeared on time, with the same serious expression as always. He sat down, opened the case folder, and looked at all of us for a long moment. Before proceeding with the sentence, he began, "I want to clarify some points that have arisen since our last hearing." He pulled out several new documents. The IRS and FBI have confirmed that Mr. Richard Stewart is formally accused of tax evasion for the amount of $2 million, in addition to money laundering through shell companies. Jessica sank into her chair. "Mrs. Jessica Miller Stewart," continued the judge, "has been identified as a possible accomplice in some of these crimes, specifically in the attempt to use her children as intermediaries for suspicious financial transfers." He paused. "However, that is not a matter for this court. The appropriate authorities will resolve that." He looked directly at Jessica. "What does concern this court is the original lawsuit, custody, and compensation for emotional damages, and it is upon that which I will pass sentence now." The air in the room became thick. I could hear my own heart beating. "I have exhaustively reviewed all the evidence presented," said Judge Miller. "The notarized letter of voluntary abandonment, the police reports, the expense records, the testimonies, and I have reached several conclusions that I want to express clearly." He leaned forward, looking first at Jessica, then at me. "Mrs. Jessica Miller Stewart, your custody claim is completely unfounded. Not only that, it is offensive. You voluntarily and deliberately abandoned your minor children. For 15 years, you provided no financial, emotional, or any other type of support. You made no genuine attempt at contact. And now, when your children are practically adults, You appear not out of maternal love, but for financial convenience linked to potentially criminal activities. Jessica had her head down. Her new lawyer didn't even try to defend her. Your demand for $250,000 for emotional damages, continued the judge with a tone of disbelief, is not only rejected but considered frivolous and malicious. The only emotional damages, in this case, were inflicted by you upon your own children. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, this court recognizes your extraordinary sacrifice. You made the decision to raise your grandchildren in extremely difficult circumstances. You did so without legal support, without adequate resources, and without any formal obligation to do so. This court recognizes that your love and dedication went beyond any reasonable expectation. I felt hot tears rolling down my cheeks. However, added the judge, there is something else that needs to be resolved. He pulled out a new document. According to calculations presented by the defense, the total expenses invested in raising Liam and Chloe over 15 years amount to $1,220,000. This includes food, education, healthcare, clothing, and other necessary expenses. He looked directly at Jessica. The law states that both parents have the obligation to provide support for their children until they reach the age of majority. You, Mrs. Jessica, completely failed in this obligation for 15 years. Therefore, this court orders that you pay Mrs. Evelyn Carter the amount of $1,220,000 as reimbursement for retroactive child support. The room went absolutely silent. Furthermore, continued the judge, for the emotional damage caused to your children and for filing a malicious lawsuit against your own mother, this court orders additional compensation of $250,000. Total amount to pay, $1,470,000. Jessica stood up abruptly. I don't have that money. Everything is frozen by the fiscal investigation. That is not this court's problem, the judge replied coldly. You have 60 days to make payment arrangements, or your assets will be seized until the debt is covered. The judge took another document. Additionally, this court grants Mrs. Evelyn Carter retroactive and permanent legal custody of Liam Alexander and Chloe Elizabeth Miller, although we recognize that both are now or are about to be adults. This is primarily for legal effects and to protect them from any future attempt at manipulation. He looked at Liam and Chloe. Young folks, you have the right to decide. Do you wish to maintain contact with your biological mother? This court cannot force you nor forbid you. It is your decision. Liam stood up. His voice was firm, without rage, just a deep sadness. Your Honor, I don't have a biological mother. I have a mother. Her name is Evelyn Carter. She is the only person who has earned that title. Chloe also stood up. I agree with my brother. We want no contact with Mrs. Jessica. The judge nodded with understanding. Then this court issues a temporary restraining order. Mrs. Jessica cannot approach Liam, Chloe, or Evelyn Carter without their explicit consent. This order will be valid for 2 years, renewable if the affected parties request it. He banged the gavel. The original lawsuit is dismissed in its entirety. The countersuit for retroactive support and damages is granted in favor of Mrs. Evelyn Carter. Is there anything else the parties wish to add before closing this case? Jessica's lawyer shook her head. Sarah did too. Then this case is closed. Court is adjourned. The sound of the gavel resonated with absolute finality. Jessica sat motionless, staring into the void. Her lawyer gathered her papers quickly and left without looking back. Slowly, Jessica stood up. She looked at us one last time from the other side of the room. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but there were no words that could repair 15 years of absence. There was no apology big enough for such deep abandonment. She closed her mouth and left the room. I watched her go. That woman I had once carried in my womb, taught to walk, consoled during childhood nightmares. That woman who had become a complete stranger, and I felt something I didn't expect to feel. Pity. Because I had Liam and Chloe. I had real love, built day by day over 15 years. I had memories of laughter in the kitchen, of shared homework, of spontaneous hugs. What did she have? Frozen money, a criminal husband, an empty house where children's laughter never echoed. She had lost the legal battle, But I had won something much more valuable: a family. Sarah hugged all three of us. Congratulations. Justice was served. But when we walked out of the courthouse and I saw the sky clearing after the threat of rain, I knew that true justice wasn't in the judge's sentence. True justice was that two abandoned children had grown up knowing they were loved, that they had learned that family isn't who gives you life, but who chooses to stay when life gets hard. That was the victory no judge could dictate, because we had already built it together, stitch by stitch, tear by tear, during 15 years of silent love. We left the courthouse under a shy sun that was barely beginning to peek through the clouds. The air smelled of wet earth, even though it hadn't rained. It was that peculiar smell of things about to change, of endings disguised as beginnings. Sarah walked us to the bus stop. Before saying goodbye, she took my hands in hers. "Mrs. Carter, you are the bravest client I've ever had," she said with shining eyes. "And I want you to know something. The money from the judgment might take time to arrive, but it will arrive. Jessica's assets will be seized if she doesn't pay. Don't worry about that." "It was never about the money," I replied with a tired voice. "It was about the truth, only the truth." "I know." Sarah hugged me one last time, and the truth won. When we got home, the three of us collapsed onto the living room sofa. No one was hungry. No one felt like talking. We just stayed there, processing everything that had happened. It was Chloe who broke the silence. "I can't believe all this time, that she lived in a $1 million house while you sold your things to feed us." "I don't want you to think about that," I said, stroking her hair. "What's done is done." "But I just don't understand," Chloe continued with a trembling voice. "How can someone do that? How can a mother wake up every day knowing she has 2 kids somewhere and simply not care?" It was a question I had asked myself 1,000 times over 15 years. I never found a satisfactory answer. "There are people who aren't built to love beyond themselves," I said finally. "It's not that they can't. It's that they choose not to. And that is a choice we cannot change nor fully understand." Liam got up and walked to the window. I could see the tension in his shoulders, in the way he clenched his jaw. "For years I blamed myself," he said without turning around. "I thought maybe if I had been a calmer baby, if I hadn't cried so much, if I had been easier to take care of, maybe she would have stayed." My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. I got up and walked to him, turning him to look at me. "Liam Alexander, look at me," I ordered firmly. He looked at me with wet eyes. "You were a perfect baby. Both of you were. Nothing she did or didn't do had anything to do with you. Do you hear me? Nothing. Her inability to love is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of her emptiness." Liam collapsed into my arms. This 19-year-old man suddenly became that 4-year-old boy asking for his mom again. I hugged him with all the strength I had left in these old, tired arms. Chloe joined the hug. The three of us stood there, in the middle of the living room, holding each other while the weight of 15 years finally found a place to rest. The following days were strange. There was a sense of relief, yes, but also melancholy, like when you finish reading a sad book and don't know if closing it brings you peace or emptiness. Liam and Chloe went back to school, but I noticed something had changed in them. They walked differently, firmer, as if they had finally stopped carrying an invisible backpack full of unanswered questions. One afternoon, 2 weeks after the sentencing, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and found a suited man with a manila envelope. "Mrs. Evelyn Carter?" "Yes, legal notification. I need you to sign here, please." I signed with trembling hands. The man left, and I stood looking at the envelope as if it could burn me. When Liam and Chloe got home, we opened the envelope together. It was a letter from Jessica's new lawyer. I read it aloud. "By means of this letter, notice is given that Mrs. Jessica Miller Stewart requests to establish a payment plan for the court-ordered debt. Because her bank accounts are frozen due to the fiscal investigation, she proposes monthly payments of $1,000 for the next 6 years. Attached, you will find the proposed payment agreement. Please respond within 10 business days." Liam read the document with an incredulous expression. $1,000 a month? She has money for a luxury car, but not to pay what she owes you? "It's a tactic," said Chloe, who had learned about laws researching on the internet. "She's trying to reduce the amount by offering long-term payments, waiting for you to say no, and then she can claim she tried to pay. But you were unreasonable. And what should we do? I asked. Chloe thought for a moment. We should accept the payment plan, but with interest. If she doesn't pay promptly any month, all assets are automatically seized. Sarah agreed when we called her. She drafted a stricter counterproposal. Jessica had no choice but to accept. The first payment arrived exactly on the last day of the deadline. $1,000 transferred to my account with a coldness that hurt more than any insult. There was no note, no message, just numbers on a screen. Is it dirty money? Liam said that night at dinner. It's money she owes us, corrected Chloe. And Grandma Evelyn is going to use it for something good. For us, for the house, for her retirement. That cleans it. But I knew that money would never make me happy. It wasn't about the dollars. It was about what they represented. 15 years of absence converted into monthly bank transactions. A cold reminder that some people only understand the language of money because they never learned the language of love. A month later, another piece of news arrived. Sarah called me with a serious voice. Mrs. Carter, I need you to sit down. I have information about Richard Stewart and Jessica. My heart sped up. What happened? Richard was formally charged and arrested. Tax evasion for $8 million, money laundering for an additional $12 million. The FBI found evidence that he used shell companies for 5 years. She paused. Jessica is being investigated as an accomplice. If found guilty, she could face 4 to 8 years in prison. I closed my eyes. I didn't feel satisfaction, only a deep sadness. What will happen to the payments she owes us? I asked. The civil debt remains valid, regardless of her criminal situation. If she goes to prison, her assets will be seized and liquidated to pay. You are recognized legal creditors, so you will have priority. When I told Liam and Chloe, their reaction was different from mine. Good, said Liam harshly. Let her face the consequences of her decisions. Liam, I scolded him gently. She is your mother. No, he replied firmly. My mother is sitting in front of me. That woman is just someone who shared my DNA. Chloe nodded in agreement. Grandma Evelyn, we understand that you have complicated feelings. She is your daughter. But we no longer have anything to feel for her, except indifference. And that's okay. You taught us that it's okay to set boundaries with people who hurt you, even if they are family. They were right, of course. But a mother's heart, even a wounded mother's heart, is complicated. That night, alone in my room, I took out an old photo of Jessica when she was a child. She was maybe 6, with 2 uneven braids I had made myself, smiling, missing her front teeth. At what point did that girl laughing in my arms become the woman who sued me in front of a judge? I had no answer. Maybe I never would. 2 months later, Richard's criminal trial began. Jessica was summoned as a witness. The local news covered the case because it involved millions of dollars and corrupt politicians. One afternoon, while changing channels, the image of Jessica leaving the criminal court appeared. She looked haggard, with deep, dark circles, her hair without its former shine. Reporters harassed her with questions. She walked with her head down, handcuffed, escorted by police. Chloe entered the living room just as the image appeared. She stopped, looking at the screen. She looks terrible, she said without particular emotion. Yes, was all I could answer. Do you feel sorry for her? I thought carefully before answering. I feel sorry for the life she chose, for the opportunities she wasted, for the love she rejected. But for her as a person? I looked at my granddaughter, with her sharp intelligence and her heart still healing. I don't know, sweetie. I don't know. Chloe sat next to me and took my hand. It's okay not to know. It's okay to have complicated feelings. You taught us that too. I turned off the TV. I didn't need to see more. 3 months after the trial, Jessica was declared an accomplice. Sentence: 5 years in prison, reducible to 3 with good behavior. Her assets were seized. The $1.5 million house was sold at auction. The luxury car, the jewelry, everything. From that money, after paying back taxes and fines, we received a check for $95,000. The rest of the debt remained suspended until Jessica got out of prison. I looked at that check for a long time. It was more money than I had seen in my life, adding up every dollar. Money that could make our life easier, but it was stained with so much pain I could almost see the tears printed on the paper. "Let's use it well," Liam said when he saw my expression. "Let's make it worth it." And that was exactly what we did. We repaired the house. We changed the leaking pipes. We fixed the roof that dripped when it rained. We painted the walls. We put a new floor in the kitchen. We invested in Chloe's education, who was about to enter pre-med. We paid 2 years of her tuition in advance. We helped Liam with the down payment on a small apartment near his job as a junior engineer. And I saved a part, just in case, for emergencies, for the uncertain future that always stalks people my age. But the most important part, the one that really mattered, couldn't be bought with money. It was sitting the 3 of us in the remodeled kitchen, drinking coffee and laughing about something silly that happened that day. It was seeing Liam arrive on Sundays with pastries to eat breakfast together. It was hearing Chloe practice her medical presentations with me as a patient audience. It was knowing we had survived the storm. Not just survived, we had blossomed in spite of it. Because in the end, Jessica had lost much more than money or freedom. She had lost the opportunity to know 2 extraordinary human beings. She had lost 15 years of laughter, of hugs, of I love yous said without thinking. And that loss, that was truly irreparable. No judge could return that to her. No amount of money could buy it back. Life after the sentencing took on a strange rhythm, like when you recover from a long illness and your body still remembers the pain, even though it's not there anymore. We moved through the days with a new freedom, but also with invisible scars that sometimes ached without warning. It had been 4 months since Jessica went to prison. 4 months in which none of us had mentioned her name out loud, as if by not pronouncing it we could make all that nightmare less real. Until one sultry July afternoon, a letter arrived. It wasn't from the judicial system. It wasn't from lawyers. It was a handwritten letter, in a plain white envelope, with the return address of the Federal Correctional Institution in the top left corner. The handwriting on the envelope was Jessica's. Liam and Chloe were at school. I was alone when the mailman delivered it. I stood looking at that envelope as if it were a coiled snake, ready to strike. I left it on the kitchen table and circled around it for an hour. I made coffee. I let it get cold without drinking it. I swept the floor that was already clean. Anything to avoid opening that letter. When I finally gathered the courage, my hands were shaking so much I had to sit down. I opened the envelope. Inside were 3 sheets written on both sides. The handwriting was different from what I remembered. Smaller, more careful, as if every word cost her physical effort. I began to read. "Mom, I know I have no right to call you that after everything. I know you probably tore up this letter without finishing it. But I need to write this, even if you never answer. I have a lot of time to think in here. Too much time. The walls of this cell are the color of dry earth, and I spend hours staring at them, watching the light change during the day. And in that endless silence, I finally understand what I did. I abandoned my children. That is the simple and brutal truth I can no longer hide behind elegant excuses or elaborate justifications. I was 25, and I chose a man over my own babies. I chose comfort over responsibility. I chose my cowardice over their well-being. Do you know what the worst part is, Mom? That for 15 years I convinced myself I had done the right thing. I told myself, they are better off without me. Evelyn can give them more than I ever could. I turned my abandonment into an act of generosity in my own mind. But it was a lie. It was all a lie. I didn't leave them for their own good. I left them because it was easier, because Richard promised me a life without responsibilities, without night crying, without sacrifices. And I, selfish and cowardly, accepted. I never asked about them. Not once in 15 years. How do I live with that? I can barely live with myself now that I see it clearly. When I close my eyes, I see Liam at 4 years old, asking when his mommy would come back. I see Chloe, so small, with her stuffed bunny, missing an ear. And I wonder, how many nights did they cry for me? How many times did they scan the crowd for my face, hoping I would return? You raised them alone. In your late 60s, a widow, with barely enough to survive, you raised them. You gave them everything I couldn't or wouldn't give, and when I finally showed up, it wasn't to apologize. It wasn't to thank you. It was to accuse you of stealing what I myself had given away. The judge was right. I came for money. Richard was desperate, and I was pathetic enough to think I could use my own children as tools. Even after 15 years of abandonment, I thought I could show up and claim them as if they were property forgotten in a warehouse. Here in prison, we share stories. There are women who killed to defend their children, women who stole to feed them, women who chose jail over abandoning them. And then there's me, the woman who abandoned them for a man with dirty money and empty promises. Do you know what the other inmates said when I told my story? You don't even deserve to be called a mother. And they are right. I don't deserve that title. I lost it the day I closed the door and never looked back. I am not writing for you to forgive me. There is no forgiveness possible for what I did. I write because you need to know that I finally understand. I understand that you were their real mother. I understand that every night you spent sewing was love. I understand that every sacrifice you made was a conscious choice to stay when I chose to leave. You also need to know something else. Richard left me. As soon as he was arrested, he blamed me for everything. He said I had gotten him into trouble, that the kids had been my idea, that I was the burden that ruined his empire. The man for whom I abandoned my children abandoned me without a second thought. The irony is almost poetic, but it doesn't make me laugh. It only makes me feel emptier. I've been thinking a lot about Dad lately, about how he died when I was 18, about how you kept going, raising me alone, working until exhaustion. Now I understand that I had the perfect example of what maternal love is. I had it in front of me my whole life. And still, I learned nothing. Liam and Chloe didn't answer me when I tried to write to them. I didn't expect them to. But I need you to know that I wrote to them, that I tried to tell them I'm sorry, even though I'm sorry is so small compared to the damage I caused. It's like trying to fill the ocean with a teaspoon of water. If you can, if someday your heart allows it, tell them their biological mother finally realized they were perfect always, that her abandonment had nothing to do with them, and everything to do with my own internal brokenness, that they deserved better, that they deserved a mother like you. I don't ask you to come visit. I don't ask for letters. I don't ask for anything, because I have already taken too much from you. I only ask that you take care of them as I know you will, because that is what you have always done. I have 3 years left here. Maybe less if I behave. When I get out, I don't know what I'll do. I don't know who I'll be. The woman who entered here is dead. She died the day the judge read my own abandonment letter aloud, and I saw the pain in my children's eyes. Whoever leaves here will be someone different. Someone carrying guilt that will never disappear. Someone who will have to live knowing she destroyed the most precious thing life gave her. You taught me to sew when I was a girl. I remember. I would sit in your lap and you let me touch the fabric. You used to say, "Every stitch counts, Jessica. If you skip one, the whole seam comes undone." I didn't understand the lesson then. I understand it now. I skipped all the important stitches in life, and everything came undone. Thank you for being the grandmother I never was as a mother. Thank you for staying when I left. Thank you for loving them when I didn't know how. Forgiveness isn't enough. It will never be enough. But it's all I have, Evelyn. The letter fell from my hands and floated to the floor like a dead leaf. I sat there, in the silent kitchen, while tears fell uncontrollably. Tears for the daughter I lost somewhere along the way. Tears for the grandchildren who never should have carried that abandonment. Tears for 15 years that would never return. But also tears of something more complex. Something that felt like the closing of a wound that had been open too long. When Liam and Chloe arrived, they found me still sitting there, with the letter on the floor and the cup of cold coffee untouched. "Grandma Evelyn, what happened?" Chloe ran to me, alarmed. I showed them the letter. They both read it in silence, passing the sheets between them. I watched their expressions change with every paragraph. Confusion, rage, pain, and finally, something that looked like exhaustion. When they finished, Liam placed the sheets on the table carefully, as if they were fragile. "It's easy to ask for forgiveness from prison," he said with a hard voice, "when she has nothing left to lose." "She's right about something," added Chloe, wiping her eyes. "Forgiveness isn't enough. It never will be." "What do you want to do?" I asked. "She tried to write to you too." "I don't want to read her letters," Liam said immediately. I don't want her forgiveness or her explanations. They arrived 15 years late. Chloe thought for a longer moment. I don't want to read anything from her either. But, she paused, choosing her words carefully. I'm glad she finally understands what she did. Not for her, for us, because it means we weren't crazy to feel abandoned, that the pain was real and valid. Liam nodded slowly. Yeah, that. I hugged them both. You don't have to forgive her. You don't have to feel anything for her. It's okay to protect your peace. Do you forgive her? Chloe asked, looking at me with those eyes that always saw too much. I thought long and hard before answering. I don't know. Maybe someday. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean things go back to how they were. It just means I no longer let her absence control me. Liam took the letter and folded it carefully. What do we do with this? We keep it, I said, along with everything else. Because it's part of the story, even if it's a painful part. That night I put Jessica's letter in the same shoebox where everything else was. The original abandonment letter, the police reports, the receipts, and now this written confession from a prison cell. It was the complete story. From abandonment to repentance, from pain to acknowledgement. It didn't heal the wounds. But at least, finally, we had the whole truth. And the truth, however painful, is better than uncertainty, because you can heal from a clear wound. But a wound you never know the source of will bleed forever. 6 months passed since Jessica's letter. 6 months in which life took on a rhythm that almost seemed normal. Liam received a promotion at his engineering job. Chloe was accepted into medical school with a full scholarship. And I, finally, could stop sewing until dawn. With the settlement money, I had been able to breathe for the first time in 15 years. It wasn't wealth. It was simply the absence of constant anguish. It was being able to buy medicine for my blood pressure without having to choose between that or food. It was being able to gift Chloe a new stethoscope for her first day of classes without having to sell anything. It was peace. Simple and precious peace. But life has a curious way of reminding you that no story ends completely clean. One February afternoon, when the heat began to subside and the city smelled of rain that never arrived, I received a call from Sarah. Mrs. Carter, I need you to come to my office. There are developments regarding the case. What kind of developments? I asked, feeling that old familiar knot in my stomach. It's better we talk in person. Can you come tomorrow at 11? That night I couldn't sleep. My mind invented 1,000 scenarios, each worse than the last. What if Jessica was appealing the sentence? What if she had found a way to annul the debt? What if Richard had escaped from prison and was coming for revenge? At 11 o'clock sharp the next day, I was sitting in front of Sarah's desk. She had a thick folder in front of her and an expression I couldn't decipher. Mrs. Carter, she began, clasping her hands on the desk. The government completed the liquidation of Richard Stewart and Jessica Miller's assets. As a legal creditor, you had priority after the tax penalties. I know that, I said with impatience. We already received the $95,000. The rest of the debt is still missing, but I understand Jessica will have to pay it when she gets out of prison. Yes, that was the plan, Sarah nodded. But there was an unexpected discovery during the final audit of the properties. She pulled documents from the folder. Richard Stewart had hidden investments he didn't declare during the process. The FBI found them 3 weeks ago. They were offshore accounts, properties registered under false names, shares in shell companies. My heart beat faster. And what does that mean for us? Sarah looked at me with something that looked like contained satisfaction. It means that after liquidating everything, including those hidden properties, after paying all the fines and tax debts, there was a surplus, and that surplus, by law, must be distributed among the civil creditors. She slid a document toward me. I looked at it without fully understanding what it said. In simple terms, Mrs. Carter, in addition to the $95,000 you already received, you will receive an additional payment of $850,000. That completely covers the original debt, plus accumulated interest, and there is still left over. The air left my lungs all at once. What? $945,000 in total, Sarah repeated with a smile. Justice, sometimes, is surprisingly precise. I couldn't process what I was hearing. That amount of money was impossible. It was more than I had earned in my entire life, adding up every dollar. "And Jessica?" I asked when I recovered my voice. "What is left for her?" Sarah's smile disappeared. "Nothing. Literally nothing. Everything was liquidated. When she gets out of prison in 2 years, she will come out without a house, without a car, without savings. She will have to start from zero, completely from zero." I should have felt victorious. I should have felt that finally the scales had balanced. But what I felt was something more complicated, a mixture of relief, sadness, and something that dangerously resembled compassion. "When will I receive the money?" I finally asked. "The check will be ready in 2 weeks. I can send it to your home, or you can pick it up here." "I'll pick it up here." I walked out of Sarah's office walking like I was in a dream. $850,000. It was a figure I couldn't even fully imagine. When I told Liam and Chloe that night, the two of them stayed silent for a full minute. Then Liam stood up and began walking in circles around the living room. "It's a lot of money," he said finally. It's enough so you never have to worry about anything ever again." "You could buy a better house," added Chloe with shining eyes. "A house with a garden, with big bedrooms, with central air conditioning." But I was thinking about something else. I was thinking about Jessica's letter, about her words. "When I get out, I don't know what I'll do. I don't know who I'll be." A 40-year-old woman, leaving prison with nothing, no family waiting for her, no money to start, no trade or education to sustain her. "Grandma Evelyn?" Chloe snapped me out of my thoughts. "What are you thinking about?" "About justice," I replied, "and how complicated it can be." The next 2 weeks passed in a haze. I slept poorly. I dreamed of numbers, dancing and multiplying. I dreamed of Jessica as a child, asking me why the world was so hard on some people. The day I went to pick up the check, Sarah handed it to me with a professional smile. "Congratulations, Mrs. Carter. Justice was served." I looked at that piece of paper. $850,000 written in numbers and letters. It was the monetary value of 15 years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of fingers bleeding over the sewing machine, of a sold watch, of a pawned ring, of tears dried in silence. But was that really worth a life? "Sarah," I said slowly, "I need to ask you a hypothetical question. Tell me, if I wanted, let's say, to set aside a part of this money, put it in a trust account that can only be accessed under certain conditions, is that possible?" Sarah looked at me with curiosity, but without judgment. "Yes, it is possible." "What kind of conditions?" I breathed deep. Liam and Chloe were going to kill me. But there was something I needed to do, not for Jessica, for me, for the woman I wanted to keep being when I looked in the mirror. "I want to set aside $100,000, I said firmly, "in an account that Jessica can only access when she gets out of prison. With conditions, she can only use it for rent of a modest home, basic food, and education or job training. No luxuries, no extravagances. Just what is necessary so she doesn't literally end up on the street." Sarah looked at me for a long moment. "Are you sure about this?" "No," I admitted, "but I'm going to do it anyway." "Do your grandchildren know about this decision?" "No, and they aren't going to agree. But the money is mine, and this is my decision." Sarah nodded slowly. "Okay, I will prepare the documents. But, Mrs. Carter, can I ask why?" I thought carefully about how to answer. Because justice isn't always vengeance. Because I want my grandchildren to see that you can be strong without being cruel, that you can set boundaries without completely destroying someone. I paused. And because, although Jessica was a terrible mother, she is still my daughter, and a mother, even a wounded one, cannot watch her daughter go out onto the street without a roof or food. It would be betraying everything I tried to teach Liam and Chloe about compassion. Sarah smiled with genuine warmth. "You are an extraordinary woman, Mrs. Carter." "No," I corrected. "I'm just a tired woman who wants to sleep in peace." When I arrived home with the deposited check and the signed trust papers, I gathered Liam and Chloe in the living room. I showed them the bank receipt. $750,000, read Liam aloud. He frowned. "Wait, the total was $850. Where is the other $100,000? I took a deep breath. I set it aside in a trust. For Jessica. For when she gets out of prison. The silence that followed was so dense you could cut it with a knife. "What?" Chloe was the first to speak, her voice rising in pitch. "You gave money to her? After everything?" "I didn't give it to her," I explained quickly. "I put it in an account she can only use for basic things: rent, food, education. She can't touch it for anything else. And she can only access it when she gets out of prison, if she meets the conditions." "But Grandma!" Liam stood up, his face flushed. "She doesn't deserve anything from you. Nothing." "You're right," I said calmly. "She doesn't deserve it. But I didn't do it for her. I did it for me. Because I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror and know that, even when someone caused me so much harm, I didn't respond with total cruelty." "That's not cruelty," argued Chloe, with tears in her eyes. "It's justice. She has to face the consequences of her actions, and she will face them," I replied. "She is going to leave prison with nothing. Without a house, without family to receive her with open arms, without the man she sacrificed everything for. Those are sufficiently severe consequences, but I am not going to leave her completely on the street, not because she deserves it, but because you deserve to see that your grandmother is a better person than your mother." Liam dropped onto the sofa, covering his face with his hands. "I can't believe you're doing this." "You don't have to agree," I said softly. "It is my decision, my money, my conscience." "And if she wastes it?" asked Chloe. "What if she uses that money for something bad?" "She can't. It's all in the trust with legal restrictions. Sarah designed it that way." I sat between them. "Look, I know you're angry. You have the right to be. But I need you to understand something. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean things go back to how they were. It just means I no longer carry the weight of hate." "We don't have to forgive her," said Liam with a hard voice. "No," I agreed. "You don't have to forgive her. Your relationship with her is your decision. But mine is different. She is my daughter before she is your mother, and I have to live with my own choices." The three of us sat in silence for a long time. I could feel the tension, the confusion, the conflict between the love they had for me and the rage they felt. Finally, Chloe spoke with a small voice. "At least promise us you will never let her hurt us again?" "I promise," I said firmly. "The boundaries remain. The restraining order remains valid. She cannot approach you without your consent. This is just, it's making sure that when she gets out she isn't completely lost." Liam took a deep breath. "I don't agree. But I respect you. And I respect your decision, even if I don't understand it." Chloe nodded slowly. "I don't agree either. But maybe someday I'll understand. When I'm older, when I have my own children, and understand how complicated it is to be a mother." I hugged them both. "I love you, and no amount of money or decision will change that. You are my priority, always." That night, alone in my room, I took out Jessica's letter and read it one more time. Her words about repentance, about starting from zero, about not knowing who she would be when she got out. I didn't forgive her completely. Maybe I never would, but I was giving her a chance to be different, not for her, for me, because I wanted to be the kind of person who breaks cycles of pain, not one who perpetuates them. I folded the letter and put it away again. Poetic justice isn't always revenge. Sometimes it is showing mercy when you have the power to completely destroy someone. It is choosing to be better than the people who hurt you. And although Liam and Chloe didn't understand it now, someday they would. Someday they would see that the true victory wasn't the money. It was keeping my humanity intact despite all the pain. That was the lesson that really mattered. 3 years later, time has a strange way of softening the sharp edges of memories. It doesn't erase them. It just makes them easier to touch without bleeding. It was a Saturday morning, fresh and clear, when my phone rang. An unknown number. Normally I didn't answer those calls, but something made me slide my finger across the screen. "Mrs. Evelyn Carter?" A female, professional voice. "Yes, this is she." "This is social worker Carmen Ruiz, from the Federal Correctional Institution. I am calling to inform you that Jessica Miller will be released next week. Since you are her direct family member and established the trust for her reintegration, we need to coordinate some details." My heart skipped a beat. I knew this day would come. Jessica had served 3 years of her 5-year sentence, released for good behavior. But knowing something intellectually is different from feeling it in your chest like a real weight. I understand, I said, keeping my voice steady. What do you need from me? Mainly, confirm that the trust is still active and review the access conditions. We also want to know if you will be present on the day of release. The trust is active, I confirmed. But no, I will not be present. There was a pause on the other end. Are you sure? Jessica has shown a lot of progress. She has completed rehabilitation programs, psychological therapy, training in basic accounting. Her therapist says she has genuinely worked on her healing process. I'm happy for her, I said, and it was true. But my presence won't help her, neither her nor me. The trust is there. It's all I can offer. After hanging up, I sat in the kitchen for a long time. The house was silent. Liam had moved completely into his apartment a year ago, although he came to eat every Sunday religiously. Chloe was in her 2nd year of med school, living near the hospital where she did her rounds, but she still kept her room here, full of books and notes. The house felt different now, quieter, less full of young voices and loud music, but not empty, never empty. Because every corner held memories of laughter, of shared dinners, of afternoons doing homework at the kitchen table. I looked around. The walls freshly painted a light peach color. The new, but modest furniture. The remodeled kitchen, where I now cooked with a stove that worked perfectly. The new clock on the wall, not as elegant as Arthur's, but functional and pretty in its own way. I hadn't gone back to sewing for money. I didn't need to. With the money invested wisely, I had enough to live with dignity without destroying my body in the process. Now I sewed only for pleasure, tablecloths to give as gifts, little dresses for the neighbors' children, things that made me happy, not things I needed to survive. When Liam arrived that Sunday with pastries, I told him about the call. His face hardened immediately. She's getting out? Next week? And what are you going to do? Nothing, I replied simply. The trust is active. She will be able to access it under the established conditions. That's all. Liam set the bag of pastries on the table with more force than necessary. After 3 years, do you still feel anything for her? It was a complicated question that deserved an honest answer. I feel relief that she has worked on herself. I feel sadness for the lost years that will never return. I feel a strange mix of hope and caution. I looked him in the eyes, but I don't feel the need to see her. I don't feel I should be there when she gets out. I did what I could do. The rest is her path, not mine. Chloe arrived an hour later, straight from the hospital, still in her white coat. She had become a beautiful and confident woman, with a determination that filled me with pride. When I told her about Jessica, her reaction was more controlled than Liam's. We knew this would happen, she said with a maturity she didn't have 3 years ago. How do you feel? At peace, I replied, and I was surprised to realize it was true. I did what I had to do. The rest isn't up to me anymore. Do you think she'll try to contact us? She asked with a cautious voice. I don't know. The restraining order technically expired, but Sarah added clauses to the trust. If she tries to contact you without your explicit consent, she loses access to the money. Good, said Liam with satisfaction. Let her know there are consequences. A week passed, then 2. We had no news of Jessica. Sarah confirmed to me that she had accessed the trust and rented a small room in a shared house on the outskirts of the city. She was working part-time at a grocery store while taking computer courses. She's trying, Sarah told me. From what I can see, she's really trying to rebuild her life. I'm glad, I replied, and I meant it. A month after her release, a letter arrived. Not to my house. It arrived at Sarah's office, who called to ask if I wanted to receive it. It's from Jessica, she said. Addressed to you. I don't have to give it to you if you don't want it. I thought about it for a full day. Finally, I told her to send it. It was a short letter this time, written on plain paper, with careful handwriting. Mom, I don't expect a reply. I just need you to know that I got out. I'm working. I'm trying to be someone different. The trust money saved my life. Literally, without it, I would have gone out onto the street with no options. I know it was your decision. I know Liam and Chloe didn't agree. Sarah told me when I signed the papers. I can't give them back 15 years. I can't change who I was. I can only try to be better than who I was. I respect their decision not to see me. I respect that Liam and Chloe don't want to hear from me. I understand. If I were them, I wouldn't want to either. I go to therapy twice a week. I work in a store. I study computers at night. It's a small life, but it's honest. For the first time in my life, I'm building something without lies. I don't know if you can ever forgive me. I don't know if you should. But I want you to know that your generosity was not wasted. You gave me a chance to be different, and I am taking that chance seriously. Thank you for being a better mother to my children than I could be. Thank you for being a better person than I was. And thank you for teaching me, even now, that compassion exists even when it isn't deserved. With respect and eternal gratitude, Jessica. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in the shoebox with everything else. The complete story, from abandonment to repentance, from pain to this small seed of redemption. I didn't answer. I didn't call. I didn't seek to see her. But that night I slept better than I had in a long time. 6 months later, on a rainy November afternoon, the 3 of us were sitting in the living room when Chloe asked an unexpected question. Grandma Evelyn, do you ever regret raising us? The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. What? Why do you ask that? Chloe played nervously with the hem of her sweater. It's just that. You sacrifice so much. Your old age, your comfort, your valuable things. Did you ever think it would have been easier not to do it? Liam was also looking at me, waiting for the answer. I got up and went to my room. I came back with a different box, not the shoebox with documents. This was an old cookie tin, decorated with faded flowers. I opened it in front of them. Inside were photographs. Hundreds of photographs. Liam taking his first steps, clinging to my skirt. Chloe in her homemade princess dress for Halloween. The 2 of them covered in flour after trying to make cookies. Liam on his first day of school with a uniform 2 sizes too big. Chloe at her dance recital, in her pink tutu. Graduations, birthdays, Christmases, ordinary Sundays that were extraordinary. This is my answer, I said with a broken voice. Each one of these photographs represents a moment I chose to stay. A moment I could have lost if I had chosen differently. Was it hard? Yes. Was it painful sometimes? Yes. Do I regret it? I looked at my grandchildren, these young adults who had become my greatest pride. Not for a single second. Chloe began to cry. Liam discreetly wiped his eyes. You saved me as much as I saved you, I continued. After your grandfather died, I felt lost, empty. You gave me purpose. You gave me a reason to get up every morning. You gave me love when I thought my days of being loved were over. Liam hugged me tightly. You are the strongest person I know. I'm not strong, I corrected. I'm just someone who loved too much to give up. Chloe joined the hug. We love you, Grandma Evelyn. More than words can express. We stayed like that. The 3 of us embraced in the middle of the living room, surrounded by photographs of a life built with love and sacrifice. 2 years later, on my 75th birthday, Liam and Chloe organized a surprise. I came home after my morning walk and found the living room full of people, neighbors, friends, Liam and Chloe's friends, social worker Sarah, who had become a friend. There was a banner. 75 years of love and strength. What is all this? I asked, overwhelmed. It's a celebration, said Chloe, taking my hand. Of you, of us, of this family we built. Liam appeared with a box wrapped in gold paper. This is from both of us. I opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was a clock, but not just any clock. It was antique, hand-wound, with gold details. It was almost identical to Arthur's clock that I had sold years ago. We couldn't get the original back, Liam explained with an emotional voice. But we searched for 2 years until we found one almost exactly the same. So you never forget that love isn't measured in objects, but sometimes objects can remind us how much we love. I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried in years. Tears of gratitude, of love, of complete healing. That night, after everyone left, I hung the clock in its place on the wall. Its tick-tock filled the house with a sound that was at once new and familiar, like life itself. I sat in my armchair, with a cup of warm tea in my hands, and looked around. This modest house that had witnessed so much pain and so much love. These walls that kept secrets of nightly tears and morning laughter. I thought about Jessica, living her small life somewhere in the city. We had never seen each other again. We had never spoken again. But according to Sarah, she was still working, still in therapy, still trying. I hadn't forgiven her completely. Maybe I never would. But I had made peace with her absence. I had turned her abandonment into the foundation of something beautiful. A family built not by blood, but by the conscious choice to stay. Liam visited every Sunday, without fail. Chloe called every night before sleeping. The two had found their paths, but they never strayed from the path that led them back to me. And I had found something I didn't know I was looking for. Living proof that true love isn't measured in perfect moments. It is measured in consistency, in showing up day after day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The clock kept ticking on the wall. Every second, a reminder that time moves forward, that wounds heal, that endings can also be beginnings. I closed my eyes, listening to that comforting sound, and smiled. Because in the end, Jessica was right about something she wrote in her first letter from prison. Every stitch counts. I had spent 15 years stitching a family together, stitch by stitch, tear by tear, sacrifice after sacrifice, and now, looking at the result, I saw that every stitch had been worth it. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real, because it was mine, because it was love in its purest and most difficult form. And that kind of love, the kind built in the trenches of pain and uncertainty, that love is unbreakable. That love doesn't abandon. That love stays, always. If this story touched something inside you, if it made you remember that true family is built with daily actions and not just pretty words, leave me a comment telling me where you are joining us from. Like if you believe that constant love is worth more than 1,000 broken promises. And subscribe to continue sharing stories that remind us that even in the darkest moments, there is always light when someone decides to stay. Because true wealth isn't in what you inherit, but in what you build with your own hands when everyone else leaves. And that, no one can ever take away from you. The end.